The Walt Disney classic, Sleeping Beauty. Adapted by Lisa Ann Marsoli. Once upon a time, there lived a kind king and gentle queen who longed to have a child. After many years of waiting, their wish was granted and a daughter was born. They named her Aurora, which means dawn, because she brightened their lives with happiness, just as the sun brightens the day. A great holiday was proclaimed to celebrate the princess's birth, and visitors were welcomed from all over the kingdom. Among those journeying to the palace were the three good fairies Merryweather, Fauna, and Flora. King Hubert, who ruled the neighboring kingdom, and his young son, Prince Philip, were also invited to attend. People streamed into the palace, bringing gifts and good wishes to Princess Aurora and her parents. Royal and common folk alike wanted to share the joy of King Stefan and his queen, and to see the long-awaited princess. When King Hubert and Prince Philip arrived, King Stefan welcomed his old friend warmly. Both kings realized that their long-time dream of uniting their kingdoms could now come true. Then and there, they declared that Princess Aurora and Prince Philip were betrothed. Soon the trumpets sounded, and three sparkling balls of light floated into the room. Out of them emerged Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, ready to bestow their special gifts on the infant princess. Flora approached the cradle first.
Little princess, she said softly, my gift shall be the gift of beauty, gold of sunshine in your hair, and lips that shame the red rose.
Then Flora waved her wand, and flowers showered down upon the sleeping beauty. Now it was Fauna's turn. My gift shall be the gift of song, she said, and as Fauna waved her wand, above the cradle a flock of colorful birds magically appeared. At last it was Merryweather's turn to present a gift to the baby. The short, plump fairy marched up to the cradle and began,
Sweet princess, my gift shall be...
But before Merryweather could continue, a great gust of wind blew open the door and swept into the room. There was a flash of lightning, a crack of thunder, and then darkness. Suddenly, a bright flame burned in the middle of the great hall. The flame took the shape of a woman dressed in a long black cape and carrying a staff. The feeling of evil that surrounded her filled the onlookers with dread.
It's Maleficent, gasped Fauna.
I was quite hurt at not being invited to your party, the wicked fairy began, addressing the king. But to show I bear no ill will, I too shall bestow a gift on the child. Listen well, all of you, she commanded, her voice echoing throughout the hall. The princess shall indeed grow in grace and beauty, beloved by those who know her. But before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she shall prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die. No, cried the queen, running to the cradle and scooping her baby into her arms. But Maleficent looked on, unmoved by the queen's anguish, and laughed at a cruel and heartless laugh. King Stefan could bear it no longer. Seize the creature, he shouted. Before the guards could reach her, Maleficent disappeared into a burst of fire and smoke. Her pet raven circled over the spot where she had stood and then flew away. The queen held the princess in her arms, and she could scarcely believe that she might ever lose the daughter for whom she had waited so long. Flora broke the stunned silence.
Don't despair, your majesties.
Flora.
Don't despair, your majesties. Merryweather still has her gift to give the princess.
Merryweather's powers were not strong enough to undo Maleficent's evil curse, but the fairies knew she could soften it a little.
Sweet princess, Merryweather said softly, a ray of hope there still may be in the gift I give to thee. Not in death, but just in sleep, the fateful prophecy you will keep. And from this slumber you shall wake when true love's kiss the spell shall break.
Even with Merryweather's help, King Stefan remained fearful for his daughter's life. To prevent the evil curse from coming true, he ordered that every spinning wheel in the kingdom be burned. That night, thousands of spinning wheels were collected and brought to the palace. As King Stefan and the queen watched the bonfire, they felt certain their daughter would now be safe. But the good fairies feared that burning the spinning wheels alone would not keep Princess Aurora safe from Maleficent's curse. They knew they had to devise some sort of plan to save the princess. Flora came up with a solution. Flora told the other fairies what they must do.
We'll disguise ourselves as peasant women and pretend Princess Aurora is an orphan we had adopted. We'll live deep in the forest, and Maleficent will never expect to find her there. Then, on the princess's 16th birthday, when the curse ends, we will return to the palace. Of course, the king and queen will object, she said gently, but when we explain that it's the only way.
Flora demonstrated her plan by turning the other fairies into peasant women. It was not easy to convince the king and queen of the plan to let the fairies take the princess. 16 years would be a long time to be without their child. Knowing that they had to do everything they could to protect their daughter, they finally agreed. One evening, soon after, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather carried the baby princess away into the night. With heavy hearts, King Stefan and his queen watched as the figures of the fairies grew small in the distance and disappeared into the forest. And so, for 16 years, the whereabouts of Princess Aurora remained a secret. In the hearts of the forest, in a woodcutter's cottage, the good fairies carried out their well-laid plan. There they raised the princess as their own, calling her by the name Briar Rose. They never revealed to her anything about the king and queen, her royal heritage, or Maleficent's curse. What's more, the three good fairies kept their true identities a secret from Briar Rose and stopped using their magic altogether. They bathed her in a wooden tub, and they cleaned and scrubbed, and did everything the way ordinary people do, so that Briar Rose would never suspect that they were different from everyone else. When Briar Rose grew and became everything the fairies had bestowed upon her when she was a baby, she was not only beautiful but kind, and wherever she went, she carried a song in her heart. Briar Rose's 16th birthday was drawing near, and the good fairies knew that soon they would need to return the princess to the palace. There she would resume her rightful identity and marry Princess Philip, as had been arranged by her father so many years before.
It seems like only yesterday that we brought her here,
sighed Merryweather. The fairies would be sad to see their time with Briar Rose end. She had filled their lives with so much joy and laughter, things that evil Maleficent could never understand. High on the Forbidden Mountain, Maleficent had never stopped searching for Princess Aurora. Year after year, her henchmen had scoured the kingdom for the girl without success.
"We've searched mountains and forests and houses," the leader told Maleficent, "and all the cradles, too."
Fools, idiots, imbeciles, Maleficent screamed, suddenly realizing that for 16 years they had been searching for a baby. Maleficent's raven swooped down and perched on the arm of her throne. "On, my pet," the wicked fairy began. "You are my last hope. Circle far and wide. Search for a maiden of 16 with hair as gold as sunshine and lips as red as rose. Go, and do not fail me." As Maleficent watched the raven fly out through the open window, she believed her pet would find the missing princess at last. At the cottage in the forest, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather were busy making plans for Briar Rose's 16th birthday party. They wanted to surprise her, so they sent her out into the forest to pick wild berries, where they got everything ready. Fauna was going to make the birthday cake, and Flora was going to sew a few special birthday dress for Briar Rose to wear. Once Merryweather understood that she was to be the model, she demanded that they use their magic so that everything would be perfect.
"No, no magic,"
Flora insisted. She knew that until the princess was back safely at the castle, the fairies still needed to keep their identities a secret. While the three fairies were busy at the cottage, Briar Rose wandered through the forest picking wild berries. Some animal friends kept her company, and when her basket was full, she sang them a song. She sang a lovely melody about the man of her dreams. Nearby, a young prince heard Briar Rose's sweet voice drifting through the trees. "Who's that singing, Samson?" the prince asked his horse. "Let's go find out." It took some coaxing, but soon Samson broke into a gallop, carrying the prince closer and closer to the sound of the enchanting voice. Briar Rose continued singing her song, daydreaming and dancing with the imaginary man she would one day love. She did not hear the prince coming up behind her. When he joined in her singing, she was quite startled. "I'm sorry," the prince said. "I didn't mean to frighten you." The prince and Briar Rose danced and sang together. Then, hand in hand, they strolled through the forest, with Briar Rose's animal friends following close behind. It was easy to see that the two were falling in love. When the prince asked Briar Rose her name, she realized that she didn't know his name or anything else about him. She suddenly remembered that the fairies had warned her never to speak to strangers. So Briar Rose turned and began to run away. "But when will I see you again?" the prince called after her. Briar Rose stopped and thought a moment. "This evening at the cottage in the glen," she told him, and then she disappeared into the forest. Back at the cottage, Flora and Fauna and Merryweather were in a panic. Fauna looked at the dress Flora had just made and said, as politely as she could, "That's not exactly the way it is in the book." Fauna's cake was in no better shape. It leaned so badly to one side that she had to brace it with a broom. Even so, the icing and the candles slid off the top of the cake and down the broom handle.
"I've had enough of this nonsense,"
declared Merryweather, peeking from out of the top of the ridiculous dress.
"I'm going to get our magic wands."
And with that, she rushed up to the attic. When Merryweather returned, the fairies shut all the doors and windows and drew their curtains. Then, certain that no one could see them, they set about making everything perfect, with a little help from their magic wands. Flora directed the ribbon and scissors until she had created a beautiful dress for Briar Rose. Fauna waved her magic wand over the table. "Eggs, flowers, milk, just do what it says," she said to the ingredients, pointing her wand to the cookbook. at the cookbook. In no time at all, a magnificent birthday cake appeared. But there was one slight problem. Merryweather decided that Briar Rose's dress should be blue, not pink. She waved her magic wand, and instantly the dress changed color. But when Flora decided that she liked the dress the way she had originally made it, pink, with a wave of her wand, she changed the dress back.
Make it blue.
Merryweather commanded her magic wand, and the dress changed color again. Back and forth the colors went. Sparkles from the wands flew around the room and up the chimney. The chimney. It was the one place the fairies had forgotten to seal off. Just then, Maleficent's raven flew overhead and saw the colorful sparkles coming from the cottage. Looking more closely, he knew that they were made by the magic of the 3 good fairies, and that he had found the princess at last. He raced back to tell his mistress, the evil Maleficent. Soon after, Briar Rose returned home from the forest. "Surprise! Surprise!" the good fairies shouted when Briar Rose walked through the door. "Oh, you darlings," Briar Rose exclaimed when she saw the cake and the dress. "Everything is so wonderful. Just wait until you meet him. He's coming here tonight," she announced dreamily. Then Briar Rose told the fairies all about the young man she had met in the forest. "She's in love," the fairies said sadly. They knew it was time to tell Briar Rose the truth. At last, when they finished, she knew that she was really Princess Aurora and that she was already betrothed to Prince Philip.
"Tonight we must take you back to your father and mother,"
Flora said softly. Briar Rose wept, for she knew she would never see her young man again. At dusk, the 3 fairies and Princess Aurora set out on the journey to the palace. As the princess walked, she thought only of the young man she had met that day. Back at the palace, King Stefan and King Hubert were toasting the upcoming marriage of their children. But King Hubert's merriment came to an end when Prince Philip arrived. Taking his father aside, announced that he was in love with a girl that he had just met in the forest. Later that night, Princess Aurora and the fairies arrived at the palace and managed to slip inside. Then the fairies left the princess in a room where they thought she would be safe. But no sooner had the fairies left than a wisp of light appeared in the room. In a trance, Princess Aurora followed the light through a secret panel and up a winding staircase to a hidden room. There stood the cruel Maleficent, next to a spinning wheel. "Touch the spindle. Touch it, I say," Maleficent commanded. The princess obeyed and pricked her finger on the spindle's sharp point. The 3 fairies returned to the room where they had left the princess, but she was nowhere to be found. They quickly followed the path that she had taken to the hidden tower and were met with a gleeful Maleficent. "Your precious princess," she proclaimed as she stepped aside to reveal the princess lying on the ground. Content to see the shock on the faces of the 3 fairies, Maleficent disappeared in flames and smoke. Tears rolled down the cheeks of the 3 good fairies. Poor King Stefan and the poor queen.
"They'll be heartbroken when they find out,"
added Merryweather. "They're not going to," replied Flora.
"We'll put them all to sleep until the princess is awakened."
The fairies made themselves very small and flew about the palace. They waved their magic wands over the guards, the royal subjects, even the king and queen, putting them all into a deep sleep. Just before King Hubert was about to go to sleep, Flora overheard him trying to tell King Stefan about the peasant girl Prince Philip insisted he was going to marry. Suddenly, Flora realized that Princess Aurora's young man from the forest was really Prince Philip. Then she remembered that the princess had said he would be returning to the cottage that very night.
"Fauna, Merryweather," she called, "come with me. We've got to get back to the cottage."
The fairies flew as fast as they could, hoping to find Prince Philip and tell him the truth. But Prince Philip was already at the door of the cottage in the glen. When he knocked, a voice from inside called for him to come in. With love in his heart, the prince opened the door and went inside. Before he realized what was happening, the prince was surrounded by Maleficent's horrible henchmen. They tied him with heavy rope and gagged him with a cloth. Maleficent stepped out of the darkness and approached the captured prince. She knew that he alone had the power to break the spell she had placed on Princess Aurora. All he had to do was to place true love's kiss on the princess's lips, and she would awake. Maleficent had to stop him. "Away with him," she commanded her henchmen, cackling. "But gently, my pets. I have plans for our royal guest." Moments later, the three good fairies reached the cottage, finding only the prince's hat inside.
"Maleficent," cried Flora. "She must have taken Prince Philip to the Forbidden Mountain."
The fairies knew it would be dangerous to go there, but they also knew they had no choice. They had to rescue the prince. By now, Prince Philip was chained to a dungeon wall at Maleficent's castle on the Forbidden Mountain. "Oh, come now, why so melancholy?" Maleficent taunted him. And to make him despair even more, she told him of Princess Aurora, asleep in King Stephan's palace. "See the gracious whim of fate," she continued. "Why, she is the same peasant girl who only yesterday won your heart." The prince strained against his shackles, knowing he had to escape somehow and save the princess. Maleficent took great joy in seeing the prince's helplessness. "I'll just leave you with your happy thoughts," she told him as she left the dungeon. At that moment, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather flew down from a crack in the dungeon wall where they had been hiding.
"Shh! No time to explain,"
they told the startled prince. Flora used her wand to break the shackles on his wrist, while Fauna released his ankles.
"The road to your true love holds still more dangers, which you must face alone,"
Flora said. Then she waved her wand, and a sword and shield magically appeared in Prince Philip's hand.
"So, arm yourself with this enchanted shield of virtue and this mighty sword of truth. These weapons will help you triumph over evil."
Armed with the sword and shield, the prince set off to save the princess. But first, he had to escape Maleficent's dangerous domain. With the fairies' help, he dodged arrows, lightning bolts, and falling rocks. But no matter what the angry Maleficent put in his way, the prince continued on. He was determined to rescue Princess Aurora. When Prince Philip neared the palace of King Stephan, Maleficent placed a wall of thorns in his path. But the prince cut the branches with his sword of truth and was able to pass through unharmed. Maleficent watched as the prince sped toward the palace bridge, but she would not let him go, would let him go no further. With a blinding explosion of flame, she turned herself into a fierce, fire-breathing dragon. It was the most hideous beast the prince had ever seen. "Now you shall deal with me," the dragon roared. Prince Philip raised his shield of virtue and charged at the dragon. In reply, the creature opened its enormous mouth and hissed great blasts of fire at the prince. He fell, but quickly returned to his feet and dodged the dragon's enormous snapping jaws. The prince tried to turn and retreat, but he found himself cornered on the edge of a cliff. The fairies watched anxiously, terrified for his life. All at once, the explosion of fire from the enraged dragon's mouth swept the prince's shield into the abyss below. The beast gathered its breath, preparing to finish off the prince with one last blast of flame. The prince took aim with his sword of truth and hurled it at the dragon. The blade pierced the dragon's heart, and the beast fell back in agony, plunging over the edge of the cliff. Now Prince Philip could fulfill his quest. He hurried through the palace gates, past the sleeping guards and servants and royal subjects. Then, led by the three fairies, he climbed the winding staircase to the tower chamber where Princess Aurora lay sleeping. Prince Philip knelt by the bed and kissed her gently on the lips. Princess Aurora opened her eyes and smiled at her prince. Instantly, the fairies began waking up everyone in the kingdom. "Oh, now you were saying, Hubert?" yawned King Stefan. "Oh, yes," King Hubert continued. "My son, Philip, says, he's going to marry." But before King Hubert could explain that his son was intending to marry a peasant girl, the trumpets sounded. All eyes turned to the grand staircase where Princess Aurora and Prince Philip made their entrance arm in arm. "It's Aurora! She's here!" cried King Stefan. The princess and her parents rushed into each other's arms, joyfully reunited at last. King Hubert tried to ask Prince Philip about the peasant girl he wanted to marry. "What does this mean, boy?" he asked. But before his son could answer, Princess Aurora went to the king and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. King Hubert blushed with pleasure and forgot whatever it was he had been saying. When it was announced that the prince and princess wished to marry, the two kings were overjoyed. Their kingdoms would be united once and for all. Prince Philip and Princess Aurora danced together as both kings and queen, and all their loyal subjects looked on. Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather watched the festivities from a balcony high above. "I just love happy endings," Fauna said with a sigh, and they all agreed that this certainly was the happiest ending that anyone could remember. And then they do the whole color changing thing, right? Where they keep changing the color of her dress. Good night. I love you.